In the deep, silent hours of the Russian night, a high-stakes gambit was underway. The operation began not with a bang, but with the whisper of electric motors propelling 6 advanced Ukrainian drones across the border. These were not just any unmanned aerial vehicles. They were UJ-26 Beavers, sophisticated instruments of war on a mission that bordered on the suicidal. Their target was one of the most dangerous and valuable imaginable, a colossal military train, 38 cars in length, laden with enough firepower to obliterate an entire city block. But before they could even approach their primary objective, the digital world around them collapsed. Suddenly, everything went dark. The vital satellite link that fed them GPS data vanished. The streams of telemetry that connected them to their distant pilots winked out. Their screens went black, replaced by the terrifying static of absolute disconnection. They were alone, deep inside hostile airspace, besieged by an invisible, silent enemy, Russia's formidable electronic warfare (EW) apparatus. The drones were supposedly dead in the air, their navigation stolen, their control signals hijacked, and their sensors completely blinded. Russian EW operators, manning the sophisticated Repellent 1 system, likely watched their screens with grim satisfaction, confident that their electronic assault was absolute. They had broadcast a barrage of fake commands, a digital siren song ordering the Ukrainian drones to abandon their mission, to land meekly, or to turn back and return to their base. The operators waited, and they waited in vain. But the drones did not fall from the sky. They did not turn back. They flew on, for they possessed a secret the Russians had not anticipated. These were not simple consumer drones that crash when their signal is lost. The UJ-26 Beavers were built for this very environment. Their resilience lay in a principle that was both brilliantly simple and fiendishly difficult to counter: frequency hopping. This technology was not new. Its invention is credited to the unexpected genius of a Hollywood actress during the Second World War. The concept involves the drone and its control station rapidly and synchronously changing communication frequencies. In the case of the Beavers, their control signals were jumping across the spectrum 1,000 times every second. It was like trying to listen to a single conversation while someone frantically spins the dial on a radio, changing the station faster than the human ear or any machine could possibly follow. By the time the Russian Repellent 1 system could lock onto a specific frequency the drones were using, the signal had already vanished, reappearing on a completely different, unpredictable point in the spectrum. The Russian operators were attempting to catch smoke with their bare hands. Properly implementing this decades-old technology was the crucial difference maker, the very thing that allowed these drones to laugh off enemy commands that would have neutralized lesser machines. With the immediate electronic threat weathered, the mission's intricate choreography began. The formation of 6 drones had a larger strategy at play. Half of the group, 3 drones in total, suddenly vanished from the main flight path. This southern contingent veered away, embarking on a longer, more perilous route that followed the natural contours of the Severodonetsk River Valley. This diversion added a significant 40 kilometers to their journey, but it was a calculated risk to stay below the radar horizon. The success of this maneuver was predicated on exhaustive intelligence work. Ukrainian planners had painstakingly mapped every known Russian radar site along the border, identifying invisible corridors created by the terrain and physics, blind spots just wide enough for a drone to slip through. Flying these corridors was an act of supreme skill and precision, akin to threading a needle at a blistering 180 kilometers per hour. The margins for error were non-existent. A deviation of just 1 kilometer too far to the left, and they would be instantly spotted by the powerful radar of an S-300 battery. A single kilometer too far to the right, and they would wander into the lethal detection zone of a Mobile Tor M2 battery. Altitude control was just as critical. The pilots had to maintain their exact height with unwavering focus. If they rose above 150 feet, their heat signatures would blossom on every Russian radar screen from the border all the way to Moscow. This daring, low-level flight path exploited a fundamental law of physics. For the Russian radar arrays positioned on the ground, the horizon was a mere 20 kilometers away for an object flying at the drone's altitude of 25 meters. The planet itself was acting as a shield, hiding the southern group from detection. This split formation immediately created a tactical nightmare for the Russian defenders. Their radar operators detected the northern group, observing their heat signatures as they moved near the M4 highway. In response, they vectored their formidable Panzer batteries to intercept this visible threat. They were completely unaware that 3 more drones were ghosting through the river valley, using the terrain as their cloak. The Russian command center was paralyzed by a classic military dilemma. Should they commit all their mobile air defense units to intercept the known threat from the north, leaving the southern approach dangerously exposed? Or should they split their defenses, weakening their ability to counter either group and risking that both might break through? It was a decision that had to be made in seconds, with incomplete information and immense consequences hanging in the balance. While the southern group continued its stealthy advance, the northern group faced its first physical objective, a critical stepping stone to the ultimate target. Their mission was to knock out the eyes of the region's air defense network, and those eyes were powered by a single massive transformer. Hitting this target would plunge the area's air defense grid into blindness for a crucial 20-minute window. Missing it would turn the drones into brightly lit targets for every anti-aircraft gun in the vicinity. The final approach to the substation at Orlovsky was a death trap. It was situated on high ground, offering clear lines of sight for defenders and exposing any attacking aircraft for over a kilometer. Ukrainian planners, however, had identified a potential weakness, a gamble based on 2-week-old intelligence. A cellular tower located 800 meters to the southwest of the substation might create an electromagnetic shadow, a blind spot in local radar coverage. If this blind spot still existed, it would provide a concealed path to the transformer and, by extension, to the ammunition train at Salsk. But the if was a monumental one. If the Russians had repositioned even a single mobile radar unit in the past 2 weeks, this supposed shadow would be a baited trap. The lead drone pilot's hands tensed on the controls as they neared the coordinates of the supposed blind spot. There was no way to confirm its existence without committing to the approach, flying into the potential kill zone. The plan required at least 3 drones to survive this phase, 1 for the transformer itself, and 2 more for the subsequent attack at Salsk. The lead drone would have to be the guinea pig, gambling its existence on the hope that the intelligence was still valid. At 02:26 a.m., the northern group arrived at the Orlovsky power station, having navigated 89 kilometers through hostile territory using a technique called radar gate threading. This tactic involves exploiting the natural gaps in radar coverage created by hills and other terrain features. The pilots, using pre-mapped routes, flew through these blind spots, effectively threading a needle between overlapping detection zones. They would briefly pop up over a ridgeline for precisely 2.898 seconds, just long enough for their systems to get a navigational fix, but too brief a period for Russian computers to classify them as a valid target, before diving back down into the radar shadow. It was a deadly game of peekaboo, played with multi-million-dollar radar systems across the entire length of their flight path. Defending the critical infrastructure were two hastily deployed Zu-23 anti-aircraft positions, their crews now wide awake and scanning the dark skies. The Zu-23 is a relic of the Soviet era, a twin-barreled autocannon that has stubbornly refused to become obsolete. Its dual 23mm cannons can unleash a terrifying torrent of 2,000 rounds per minute, with an effective range of 2,500 meters. While almost useless against modern jets, they are devastatingly effective against slower-moving drones, provided the gunner can track the target. And that was the system's critical weakness, its age. Lacking any modern radar guidance, the gunners had to rely on simple optical sights, manually tracking their targets. It was, as one might imagine, like trying to shoot skeet with a sniper rifle during a thunderstorm.
Through the thermal camera of the lead Beaver, the pilot saw his objective with stark clarity. A massive 330 kilovolt transformer, the size of a small building, glowing with heat. This single piece of equipment was the beating heart of the entire regional power grid. No fewer than 6 air defense sites, including a sophisticated Panzer battery located further south, drew their electricity directly from this transformer. To destroy it would be to collapse the entire local air defense network like a house of cards. 2 kilometers out, the 3 drones executed a classic pincer formation. The lead drone initiated the deadly ballet, climbing abruptly to 300 meters, deliberately making itself a conspicuous target to draw the defender's fire. Immediately, both Zu-23 positions swiveled towards it, their barrels erupting with streams of tracer rounds. But this was precisely the plan. As the gunners focused their attention upward, the second and third drones hugged the ground, approaching from opposite, undefended sides. The second drone suddenly popped up just 100 meters from the station's perimeter fence, flying so low and so close that the Zu-23 crews could not depress their barrels far enough to engage it. High above, the lead drone performed a spectacular barrel roll through the tracer fire, using a countermaneuver learned from studying Russian gun camera footage. By suddenly reversing the direction of the roll, the pilot wrong-footed the gunner, causing him to overcorrect. This momentary confusion was all the third drone needed to streak in from the east, flying an incredibly audacious path between 2 rows of high-voltage cables. As it cleared the towers, all 3 drones converged on the transformer simultaneously from different angles. The first impact came from the low drone, striking the transformer's base and rupturing its cooling system with a 20-kilogram KZ-6-shaped charge. The second impact came from the high-altitude drone, punching through the top bushing. The third drone completed the trifecta, striking the control cabinet to prevent any automated systems from isolating the damage. The transformer's cooling oil met superheated metal and flashed into vapor, creating a massive fuel-air explosion. With nowhere to go, 330,000 volts of electricity turned the air itself into a conductor, unleashing massive, violent arcs of energy. Protective relays began sequentially disconnecting other substations, a chain reaction that plunged half the region into sudden, profound darkness. At military installations across the region, emergency generators coughed to life, but they needed precious time to warm up. For the next crucial 20 minutes, the digital nervous system of the Russian air defense network was in chaos. Every radar screen would flicker, every computer would reboot, and every air defense system would be severely degraded, blind, and disoriented. And all the while, the 3 drones of the southern group were already racing toward their now vulnerable primary target, the train at Salsk.
At 2:33 a.m., the crew of the Pantsir S-1 air defense system at the Salsk railway station watched their world of digital certainty collapse. The power surge from the destroyed Orlovsky substation had ripped through the grid like an electric tsunami, knocking out the early warning radars, command centers, and the vital communication links that fed them targeting data. The Pantsir itself still had power from its own engine, but the system was never designed to operate in isolation. It was designed as one deadly node in a vast, interconnected network. Without that network, the crew was effectively blind, with only seconds instead of minutes to react. 3 kilometers to the south, the UJ-26 drones of the second group burst through the storm clouds. They had traveled an astonishing 155 miles using infrastructure masking, following railway lines where the steel rails and overhead electrical wires created a corridor of intense radar interference. The timing of their arrival was a stroke of intelligence genius. Ukrainian planners knew that the Pantsir crew conducted its shift change at 02:30 a.m., a 10-minute window where both crews would be gathered in the command vehicle. The drones arrived precisely within this window of vulnerability, when reaction time would be slowest. Without GPS, they relied on terrain features glimpsed through the rain. Inside the Pantsir, the gunner squinted at his thermal display, struggling to separate phantom returns from genuine targets. With the main systems offline, he was forced to use the manual tracking mode, fighting against sluggish hydraulics operating on reduced power. The fire control computer, designed for microseconds, now labored for 3 full seconds to generate a firing solution. He squeezed the launch trigger. Nothing. The system's battery voltage had dropped below the minimum required. Cursing, he switched to emergency mode, bypassing safety interlocks. On the second attempt, a 57 E6 missile roared from its launch tube. But launching the missile was only half the battle. The crew had to guide it manually with a joystick while peering through rain-obscured optics. It was a task of impossible difficulty. The missile's fragile radio command link flickered and died after only 400 meters, another casualty of the power shortage. Unguided, the missile passed harmlessly over the drone. The moment the missile went ballistic, the 3 Ukrainian drones scattered. The lead drone dove left, the second jinked right and climbed, while the third maintained course. This scatter tactic brilliantly exploited a fundamental limitation of manual tracking. A human operator can only focus on one target at a time. As predicted, the gunner involuntarily tracked the climbing drone, the most visually distinctive target. By the time he realized his mistake, the lead drone had already ducked behind a warehouse. A $15 million piece of sophisticated Russian air defense technology had been reduced to an expensive, ineffective fireworks display. The crew commander screamed at his men to prepare another shot, but it was futile. The battery voltage had now dropped below critical levels. The fight was over.
The 3 drones regrouped 500 meters from the station, now approaching from 3 different points of the compass. They synchronized their final attack run using their precise onboard clocks, a plan that required no radio emissions that might betray their coordination. On the degraded displays inside the Pantsir, the crew could see the drones approaching, but they were powerless to stop them. With the defenders effectively firing blind and their most advanced weapons system neutralized, nothing stood between the drones and their primary target. At 02:41 a.m., the 3 surviving UJ-26 Beavers converged on the Salsk railway station. Their thermal cameras painted a scene that exceeded the Ukrainian planners' wildest hopes. Stretched out across multiple tracks sat the 38-car military train, its manifest a terrifying shopping list for waging war.
Hundreds of tons of artillery shells and rocket ammunition alongside massive tanker cars filled with diesel fuel, a dormant volcano of destructive potential just waiting for a spark. The drones executed their final attack run with cold, surgical precision, approaching in an offset echelon formation at different altitudes to slow any potential defensive reaction time. The first drone began its terminal dive, aiming directly for the locomotive. The engineer, having heard the air raid sirens, was desperately trying to get his colossal train moving, but it was too late. The UJ-26 struck the locomotive's engine compartment, its shape charge slicing through the engine block and rupturing fuel lines. In an instant, the 38 cars of ammunition and fuel were anchored to the tracks, a stationary and helpless target. 6 seconds later, the second drone struck its designated target, fuel car number 3, chosen specifically because it sat upwind from the ammunition cars. 60,000 liters of diesel fuel began gushing from the ruptured tank, creating a burning river of fire that spread with terrifying speed upon meeting the hot, shattered metal of the destroyed locomotive. The third and final drone targeted an ammunition car near the center of the train, a position calculated to spread secondary explosions in both directions. Ukrainian intelligence had identified which specific cars carried the most sensitive and volatile cargo. The KZ-6 warhead penetrated the car's reinforced walls and detonated amongst pallets of 152mm artillery shells. By the time this third drone made its run, the lake of burning diesel fuel had already reached the undercarriages of the ammunition cars. The warhead struck a car whose contents were already being heated to critical temperatures, guaranteeing the sympathetic detonation that would consume the entire train. 3 drones, 3 precise impacts, 1 unstoppable, catastrophic chain reaction. In the aftermath, the Russian Ministry of Defense would issue a sterile statement claiming to have shot down 22 Ukrainian drones that night. But the truth was being told in real time through the live-streamed videos from dozens of civilian smartphones. The regional governor's official admission that a mere 2 fuel tanks and a locomotive were damaged seemed almost satirical when contrasted with the footage of a kilometer-wide plume of smoke, a scar so vast it was visible from orbiting satellites. The mission was a devastating success, a testament to meticulous planning, technological superiority, and the extraordinary courage of the pilots who flew into the heart of the storm and emerged victorious.